Steve Small Engine Saloon again, guys. I'm Steve. This is my small engine saloon. I've got a surprising number of emails, comments on Steve Small Engine Saloon lately, asking about specifically for the Stihl FS90 not running properly. A lot of you guys out there don't know that these are actually 4-stroke engines. They have valves on the top of the engine. There's millions of these things out there. They're on FS90s, FS100s, FS 110s, 130s, and all the equivalent KM units, the split shaft ones, the combi units, all those. There's some handheld blowers out there. There's some backpack blowers out there made by Stihl that are all 4-stroke engines. They have valves in them. If those valves are not set properly, your engine's not going to run right. These are actually quite critical in these things that they're set right. This is super easy to do. The only tools that you even need to do this is a T25 Torx driver tool, wrenches, either a 5/16 or an 8mm wrench you're going to need, a feeler gauge. I'm not going to say right now that you actually need this. I'm going to show you how to adjust this properly using a feeler gauge, and then I'm going to show you a little trick. If you can't get your hands on a feeler gauge, I'm going to show you a little trick on how to do it with not a feeler gauge. And obviously, Sleeman's Honey Brown is going to make this job go way smoother. Oh, that is smooth. Little flashlight might come in handy too. Here's how we're going to do this. We got to get this top cover off. 3 bolts. I got my Torx on a little drill here, make it a lot faster. There's 3 bolts to get this top cover off. 2 in the front and 1 on the back. Get those 3 screws out of there. There's the one on the back. And that cover will just pull off of there. Put that aside. Now, boom, you can see that valve cover. There's a valve cover sitting right on top of that engine. There's 1 screw holding that down. It's going to be a lot easier for you to do this if you just pull that spark plug boot off of there. Just jam it over there by the by the muffler somewhere to get it out of the way. That makes it a little bit easier. Get that valve cover off, pull that screw out. It's quite a long screw. Pull that out of there. Now that valve cover pulls right off. Now you can see your rocker arms on there. You can see the top of your valves and the springs. This is where we're going to adjust these valves. What we have to do now is set the engine, set the valve, set the piston at top dead center on the proper stroke. Stihl made it very easy for you to do this. You don't even need to take the spark plug out of this thing. If you want to take the spark plug out, go ahead and take the spark plug out. It makes it a little bit easier to turn over. You don't need to do it. What you want to do is spin that flywheel around. You can see the flywheel right down there. Spin that flywheel around so you can see this little arrow. There's a little arrow stamped right on the side of the flywheel. You want to line that arrow up with the screw on your coil, on your ignition module. That's going to tell you where top dead center is. And there it is right there, lined right up. Now, you can actually have this on the wrong stroke. You have to do this. Wiggle your flywheel back and forth with your fingers. You see that right there? I'm just wiggling that back and forth with my finger, and those valves are moving up and down. That's the wrong stroke. What you have to do is turn the flywheel around one more complete turn, back to the arrow again. Right there. Now you wiggle that back and forth and those valves are not moving. That's where you want to adjust these valves. Now, the proper way to do this is to have a little feeler gauge. You can get one of these from Stihl Limited. Any Stihl dealer is going to be able to sell you one of these. They're going to have a little kit like this. Hopefully they would have this. It's a little kit that includes the feeler gauge, a new gasket for that cover right there, and also a new little washer that goes on the screw on the top of that cover. You don't need to change your gasket in that little screw washer there. You don't have to do that every time. But this little kit, it's cheap. The part number is 4180-007-1005 for that little kit. It's cheap. If you can't get one of these things because of where you live or whatever, maybe it's a Sunday and all the Stihl dealers are closed. Could be. If you have an automotive one, like this, big fan feeler gauge like that, you got one of those, pick your 4/1000th of an inch feeler gauge, and you can actually cut a little sliver off of this. Now this is a super thin feeler gauge. You got a pair of tin snips, you can cut a sliver off of that. Probably even do it with scissors if you want to, it's so thin. Cut it off so you got a little sliver like this, and then you can use that in there too. Or what I did on this one, as you can see, I just cut both sides off so I got a little point on that one. It doesn't destroy your feeler gauge set. You can still use this in your automotive or whatever else you're doing. It's just you're making yourself a little point there so you can use it in this application. Okay, so we got that flywheel turned at the right position right there where that arrow is pointing at that screw. I'm going to show you how to do this properly with a feeler gauge, whether it be that little sliver you cut off or the one that you got from your Stihl dealer. How do you do this? You put that feeler gauge in there right like this, so it just slides in there. Take your 8mm wrench, socket, whatever, 5/16, and turn those nuts on the top of that rocker turn them in and out till you can just feel a little resistance on that feeler gauge. You don't want it to slide in and out freely. You don't want it to be pinched in there. You want it just to slide in and out of there with a little bit of resistance. That's how you do that properly with a feeler gauge. Do that on both valves. If you don't have your feeler gauge from the Stihl dealer, if you don't have an automotive feeler gauge set that you can trim a little sliver off of there, here's this little trick I was going to show you. No feeler gauges involved. Take your 8mm or your 5/16 wrench. You can feel these rocker arms are loose. You can feel that with your fingers. Start turning that nut in slowly as you're wiggling that rocker arm. Keep turning that and turning that until all of a sudden you realize you can't wiggle it anymore. You know that that rocker arm now is making contact with the top of the valve stem. You know that right there, now it has zero clearance. Take your wrench and open that nut from there 1/8 of a turn. 1/4 of a turn is way too much. 1/8 of a turn, that's all you need. Now grab that rocker arm and you're going to feel that's loose again. 1/8 of a turn. I take my little feeler gauge now and check that, and it is really close to being proper. Your engine should run perfectly fine just like that. there you go. Whether you're using the feeler gauge to do that or doing it with no feeler gauge like I just showed you, do that on both valves. Your valves are done. Get that cover back on there. Screw that back down. Get your spark plug boot back on there. Top cover back on. Put those 3 screws back in where you took them out from. I think you're going to see a difference on that, on how this thing runs. 4-stroke Stihls, very critical for the valve clearances. I hope I helped you guys out again as usual. Subscribe to my channel, at least give me the thumbs up if you liked it, if it helped you. And there you go, guys. Till next time, Steve out.